All right. Okay, everyone. So let us continue. So today we are going to look at a sutta called the Subas Sutta. You know what Suba means? No, don't know what Suba means? Okay, you're not a perfect in Pali yet. You're still learning Pali, still starting out. Yeah, Suba means beautiful. Yeah, so this is, but actually it's a name of a person, but it means beautiful. So for example, you have when you practice the Brahma Viharas, when you practice metta, the purpose of metta is to be Suba Adimutto. Adimutto means like you're focusing on her, and you're focusing on Suba, on the beautiful. And that's kind of one of the results of practicing metta bhavana, if you really take it far. So that's kind of cool, isn't it? Perceiving the beautiful. That's kind of the idea with this. So here we have a person called Suba, so this person is called Beautiful. It's a nice name, I suppose. So let's see what happens. So this is the sutta, which is, so far we've been looking at many kind of short extracts of the suttas. This is actually a complete sutta. And so, which is nice sometimes to do complete sutta as well and doing all of these little extracts. And so I thought for a change, I don't think I've ever done the sutta before on the retreats, I thought it might be nice to do this. And it ends up with a very nice description of the Brahma Viharas, which is quite, almost not quite unique to this sutta, but it's quite rare, it's not found in so many other places. And that makes it interesting because, of course, as I already mentioned, the Brahma Viharas and the Samadhi states in Buddhism, these are some of the most important freedoms and liberations that we can talk about. So these are, for that reason, very significant for the theme that we're looking at now as well. So let's say what this Suba has to do. Yeah, you can imagine that Suba will meet the Buddha, and so we'll see what happens when Suba meets the Buddha, and see if there are some fireworks coming out of that. So this is how it goes. This is from the Majjhima Nikaya MN 99, so the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, Sutta number 99. And this is how it goes, Bhante Sujato's translation again here. So, I have heard, at one time the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery here. So those of you who came on the pilgrimage, you know what it looks like, yeah, in Anathapindika's monastery here. And so in those days it would have been somewhat similar. You remember the Savatthi, the city on the side, you had all the kind of the large embankments that kind of housed the city and all of that. You get some feeling for what it was like. Very flat there, yeah, not very, not kind of all that interesting in some ways, which is nice. Is that a good thing that it's flat and boring, or is that a bad thing that it's flat and boring here? I remember Ajahn Brahm, he always used to say that the best monks in Thailand, they came from the most boring part in Thailand, the northeast. It's flat, there's nothing to be seen in this area. It's just rice farms everywhere. And actually tapioca is one of the things that would grow there. There's just kind of this flat nothingness, so nothing going on. And in the old days, back in the 1970s, when Ajahn Brahm started his monastic career, there was no entertainment. It was really poor. There was just villages kind of going on with the same life they've been doing for the last 2,000 years or whatever. Same thing. Nothing had really changed. That had the best monks. And I think there is a connection to that. If life is too interesting, too exciting, too many things going on, you get distracted. Yeah, may you live in interesting times. Is that kind of supposed to be a curse, isn't it? May you live in interesting times. You can see why it is a kind of curse, yeah? Because actually it is very distracting to live in interesting times. And maybe our times are a little bit too interesting, yeah? So maybe that's kind of our curse in a sense. So maybe that's a good thing that the Jeta Grove was in a very boring place, nothing much going on. Anyway, that's where the Buddha stayed, so it's kind of significant. Now at that time, the student Suba, Todeya's son, was residing in Savatthi at a certain householder's home on some business. Yeah, so he was a Brahmin, and so the Brahmins were business people sometimes, and so he was on business in Savatthi, and he was the son of Todeya. Todeya was one of those prominent Brahmins in those days. There were a few Brahmins that were very prominent in this part of India, and Todeya was one of those, and there were a few more as well. And some of them became Buddhists. Very prominent Brahmins. They became Buddhists because they recognized that the Buddha was, his teachings were more interesting than the ordinary Brahmanical duties that they were up to. Then Suba said to that householder, Householder, I have heard that Savatthi does not lack for perfected ones. What ascetic or Brahmin might I pay homage to today? It's kind of nice, isn't it? I love this kind of thing. And this says something about the Indian culture. Indian culture is about very spiritual practice, a very important part of Indian culture. Everyone has their guru. Everyone has their own god. Everyone is interested in, to some extent at least, how to develop the mind, how to do something positive with your life. And so when you're visiting a new city like Savatthi, you ask, are there any perfected ones here? Perfected ones are arahants. Yeah? Are there any arahants in the city? How often have you asked that? Yeah, where is the nearest arahant in KL? Near Wern, what do you reckon? Are they around? Maybe in VGF, maybe there's some arahants in VGF. Yeah, so this is the right kind of question to ask, right? So whenever you go to a new city, or whenever you stay in here in KL, you should ask this question: Where is the nearest arahant? Is there an arahant nearby? And sometimes you don't know, of course, who the arahants are. Nor does Suba. He doesn't know what the arahants are, because this is very hard to know, very hard to actually discern. And one place in the suttas, I remember the Buddha, he asks a householder, he asks him, well, who do you give it to? When you give an offering, who do you give to? And this householder replies, is that I only give it to those who are arahants, or those who are on the path to arahantship. And the Buddha says to him, it's very difficult for you to know, who is an arahant and who is on the path to arahantship. You are you're just a householder, That's what it says to him. You are enjoying kind of the five sense pleasures. How do you know who is an arahant? Your view of the world is very different from the view of the world of the Aryas, the noble ones. And so it's actually very difficult to know. So all we can do is we can have a general feeling, for who might be worthy of respect. And then we pay respect to those without really being too sure. But it's the right kind of question to ask anyway, because it directs the mind in the right way. Who are the arahants? Are there any arahants in Savatthi? Are there any arahants in KL, in Penang, in Perth, in New York, in wherever, so then we are kind of on the right track. And of course, then he asks, who should I pay homage to? And of course, the unsurprising answer is that he says, Sir, the Buddha is staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. You may pay homage to him. So he was very lucky to have a friend who had some insight, some ability to discern who was truly worthy of respect. And this is one of the things about Kalyanamitas. Kalyanamitta is someone who brings you to the Dhamma, who brings you to those people who really are worthy of respect. If you have a friend who can bring you to that, wow, what incredible value that is. Nothing is more valuable if someone can bring you to the true Dhamma. I don't know, maybe some of you are here for the first time, and maybe now you think, wow, the suttas, you get inspired by the suttas. If someone has brought you to be able to come to the suttas of the Buddha, it's incredibly fortunate. It happened to me as well. I was very fortunate. I was born in kind of this faraway atheist country where no one believes in nothing. to kind of put it that way, yeah. And somehow I kind of found my way through this, through some kalanamittas, and I should be very grateful to those kalanamittas who kind of got me to where I am now. What a wonderful thing that is, and we should all think like that, yeah. When someone brings you to the Dhamma in this way, that's incredibly good fortune. These are the real kalanamittas who open up the door to something very profound and very beautiful, in fact, to the meaning of life itself. If you can actually find, so this is what that happens to us, and then we bring that on to the next generation, to the people after us. That is our job. We have been shown that kindness, now we pass that kindness on to other people. So, then, acknowledging that householder, Suba went to the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to the Buddha. Yeah, Buddha, always very polite. You exchange greetings. How are you? How's it going? Are you well? Have you had enough to eat? Where have you come from? Are you at ease? Are you relaxed? Just to make people feel at ease. Very important to feel at ease if you're going to hear the Dhamma. If you feel tense and uptight and you are afraid of the teacher, it is not helpful to be able to understand the Dhamma. So the Buddha puts you at ease, and that's kind of one of the things that you see with this sort of exchange of greetings. So what does he say to the Buddha? What would you say to the Buddha if you met the Buddha? Have you ever thought about that? What would you say to the Buddha? If the Buddha was there, you would say, "Oh," you say, what? Hi there. Okay. Be careful. You have to be respectful if the Buddha is there. If you say hi there, it might be considered a little bit disrespectful. Thank you. You can say thank you to the Buddha. That's a nice one. So just say thank you. Oh, thank you, Venerable Sir. Oh, I very happy, very fortunate. Thank you for coming to KL. If the Buddha came to KL, I don't know if he would come to KL, but maybe he would. What was that? The Buddha is here. Yeah, right on the screen. He's right there. Yeah. Okay, I was thinking more of the kind of in your heart, is he? Is that a claim or something, or is that no? Okay. Of course, it wouldn't be here. Maybe. Yeah, there is some inclination. There's a little bit of spark there. I'm not sure if it's the full Buddha yet. You may have to go a bit further to get the full Buddha, but the spark is there, right? That's kind of what matters. Yeah. So you have a point. I admit. Anyway, so let's see what he says to the Buddha, because maybe this will give us some idea what we should say next time we meet the Buddha. Okay, worthy Gautama, the Brahmins say. So they have already done away, the small talk is already finished. Now we get to what's the opposite of small talk? The big talk. The big talk begins. The Brahmins say, lay people succeed in the system of the skillful teaching, not renunciants. What do you say about this? So the Brahmins are pretty straight to the point, no messing around. They kind of just say it as it is. I remember when Ajahn Brahm also likes people who are straight to the point. I remember he went to Canada once, to Vancouver. And there's a monastery there, quite a monk who was reasonably well known on the internet, Venerable Sona. Have you heard about Venerable Sona? Yeah, he's in Vancouver. And when Ajahn Brahm went to visit them in Vancouver, he went to the monastery called Birken Monastery, a couple of hours outside. And then straight away, Ajahn Brahm sat down, and the first question was about the nature of Nibbana. That was straight away, yeah? So, do you believe this, A, or do you believe B? Yeah, that was kind of how the conversation started. Ajahn Brahm thought, great, no messing around, no kind of preliminary talk, no kind of... And you can see why, because you don't really want to waste time. I mean, it's important for people to feel at ease, but then once you get down to it, okay, no need to talk about all the nonsense that we often talk about. Let's get down to business. And in a sense, this is what he is doing here as well. This is the Brahmin way of getting down to business. He has no idea about Nibbana, he's just an ordinary Brahmin, so he gets down to business in the Brahmanical way of being in business. So he asked a question, and the question here basically is, who are most successful on the spiritual path, lay people or monastics? That's what he's asking here. Are lay people more successful, or are renunciants more successful? That's kind of an interesting question. Yeah, maybe it means, depending on what the Buddha said, maybe it means you don't have to become monks and nuns. Yeah, is that good? If you don't have to become monks and nuns, yay! You don't have to become monks and nuns. I don't know what you think about that. This is often how people think. They think that being a monk or nun, that's kind of terrible and it's really bad. And if I can avoid it, it's good. But of course, that's misunderstanding the whole thing. Because the point is, you want to become a monk and nun. You are desperate to get into the robes as quickly as possible because you understand what is going on. You want to become a monk and nun. You will beg on your knees, please allow me to ordain. Yeah, that's kind of that is kind of what happens. What happens when you have a certain perception, a certain depth of meditation, that is what you want to do because you understand that this meditation, which is so meaningful for you, is much more easily had in the monastic life than in lay life. So it is not really like that. If you think that, I don't have to become a monk or nun, I'm glad, then you haven't really understood what is going on yet. So that, anyway, this is still interesting because what we are looking at now is this a difference between monasticism and lay life and how they kind of measure against each other. Yeah, so the Brahmins thought that the lay people succeed but not the renunciants, and the reason why the Brahmins thought that is because, the Brahmins were basically lay people, so they had to think that, otherwise they would become monastics, obviously. Yeah, so it kind of makes sense. Yeah, so they would think that, but of course, because the Buddha is a monk, he wants to know, how come you are a monk if lay life is better? What's the point of being a monk if lay life is better? Something like that. And then the Buddha replies, this is exciting, isn't it? What is he going to say? You have read it already? I'm sure you have, so you know already. But it's kind of exciting because these are some of the questions. Yeah, what actually is better? Is there a one-sided answer to this? On this point, student, I speak after analyzing the question, not one-sidedly. And this is a common thing. Almost always, we have seen this already with the words like freedom. There is the right kind of freedom and the wrong kind of freedom. It's not a one-sided thing. Freedom isn't always right. It depends on what we mean by it. And so many things on the path is really about analyzing it first of all to understand its negative side and its positive side. Then we understand whether something is good or bad. So when the Buddha is asked a question, he replies in 4 kinds of ways. Yeah, you know that little sutta about the 4 ways of answering questions. Do you know those 4 ways? No, you don't know the 4 ways? Okay, yes. I'm sure maybe some of you do. So the 4 ways, one side is it's like you just give a categorical answer, yeah, straight to the point. Yeah, this is the way it is, it's not like that. Jhanas, are they good or bad? They are good, end of story. Yeah, that's kind of the sort of thing. Yeah. Virtue, is virtue good or bad? Virtue is good. Yeah, be virtuous. These are one-sided things, there's no doubt about it, it's one-sided. Then there is the ones that you do after analyzing, or you give a detailed reply after analyzing. Vibhajja vada is the word that is used here for that. Then there is the question where you ask a counter question. Yeah, someone asks you and you ask a question back. Or sometimes you just remain quiet. You don't say anything. Someone asks you a question and you know they're coming from the wrong place. They're coming to argue with you or whatever. You know what it's like when someone just asks the questions to argue? Kind of very exhausting. Yeah, you don't really. It's very tiring when that happens because they're not really interested in your answer. They're interested in making their own point. And it's fine to make your own point, but it's about time and place. So these are the 4 things. And so here we have the one where the Buddha speaks after analyzing. This is the Vibhajja vada. And Vibhajjavada is later on becomes one of the names for one of the schools of Buddhism, the Vibhajjavadins. And this is the school which encompassed also the Theravada and the Shtaviravada and that side of Buddhism. Many of those schools together were grouped together as the Vibhajjavadins. There was the ones who spoke after analysis, after analyzing. And it's kind of interesting. You wonder whether they got it right. If the Buddha had 4 ways of answering questions, and the Vibhajjavadins chose one of those 4, maybe that wasn't quite right. Because if you only choose one of the 4, you only got a quarter of the teaching here. One of the 4 ways. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, the moment you choose something from the suttas, Theravada is also a word that actually occurs in the suttas. Is found in the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, the Noble Search, Majjhima 26. You find the Theravada, the doctrine of the elders, quite literally. Once you choose one thing, you are eliminating those things that you don't choose. And so maybe that was not quite right. But in this case, in many cases, it is right to analyze things. So let's see what the Buddha, how he analyzes this. I don't praise wrong practice for either lay people or monastics. Because of wrong practice, neither lay people nor monastics succeed in the system of the skillful teaching. The system of the skillful teaching is just the spiritual system, whatever that is. In this case, we're talking about Buddhism, of course. So, in other words, if you practice in the wrong way, then you are badly off, whether you are a lay person or a monastic. It's bad. And then I praise right practice for both lay people and monastics. Because of right practice, both lay people and monastics succeed in the system of skillful teachings. And so this is kind of interesting. Very often, we ask this question, is it better to be a lay person or be a monastic? Well, it depends what you do, what you make out of that life. That is actually much more important. And as I mentioned the other day, there are some lay people who practice incredibly well, who are really, really inspiring people. And there are many monastics who are not very inspiring. But then it's also the other way around. There are some monastics who are truly inspiring, and many lay people who are not so inspiring. So it kind of goes both ways. So it's more about looking at how people do things. So if you want to be a monastic, then do it well. If you want to be a layperson, do it well. That is more important than choosing between the two, doing things in the right way. So that's kind of a nice reply. This is kind of how the Buddha often does reply. So, of course, if you really want to practice the path fully, then of course monastic life is preferable because it gives you that opportunity to do it fully. But more important than that is to make sure you do things right in the first place. Then the Brahmin student Subas says, Worthy Gautama, the Brahmins say, since the work of the lay life has many requirements, duties, issues, and undertakings, it is very fruitful. But since the work of renunciants has few requirements, duties, issues, and undertakings, it is not very fruitful. What do you say about this? So in other words, if you have a lot of things to do, then it's good. If you don't have many things to do, then it's bad, according to this. So it is more fruitful. And you can imagine that the Buddha is not going to answer one-sidedly again, because it's not really about how much you have to do, obviously, but about how you do things is more important. So again, the Buddha says, on this point too, I speak after analyzing the question, not one-sidedly. Some work has many requirements, duties, issues, and undertakings, and when it fails, it's not very fruitful. Some work also has many requirements, duties, issues, and undertakings, and when it succeeds, it is fruitful. So it's not the number of duties, it is whether you succeed that matters. Some work has few requirements, duties, issues, and undertakings, and when it fails, it is not very fruitful. Some work also has few requirements, duties, issues, and undertakings, and when it succeeds, it is very fruitful. So it is about whether the work works out, whether you succeed, whether it has the results, whether you apply yourself in the right way so that it succeeds. That is what matters, not the quantity of work. Or at least that's not the most important thing. Actually, it matters a little bit as well, which I'll come back to that later on. And what work has many requirements, duties, and issues and undertakings, and when it fails, it is not very fruitful? Farming. And what work has many requirements, duties, issues, undertakings, when it succeeds, it is very fruitful? Again, it is farming. And what work has few requirements, duties, issues, and undertakings, and when it fails, it is not very fruitful? Trade. And what work has few requirements, duties, issues, and undertakings, and when it succeeds, it is very fruitful. Again, it is trade. I don't know if is this true? Trade is kind of for the lazy people, and farming is for the hardworking people. I'm not sure if this works like this anymore these days. Maybe in those days it was like that. I think these days, people who trade can be very... But anyway, you get the idea. There's different kinds of work. Maybe it's better to compare between government work and private sector work. I don't know what it's like in Malaysia, but in many Western countries, if you want a job which is kind of 9 to 4, you don't have to work too hard, work for the government. Yeah. Same here. Okay, so same everywhere. Okay, so I often tell people, work for the government. Yeah, relax, take it easy, have a kind of one of these like trade work. Yeah, not too many duties. You can come more to the BGF and you can hang out with your mates here. That's kind of nice. But it's not really the quantity of work that is most important. It depends on how you apply yourself. On the other hand, it also matters a little bit. You all know that if you're too busy, then there is no time to learn about Dhamma, there's no time to do meditation, there's no time to do all of these other things. Moreover, if you're too busy, you get stressed. And if you are stressed, you become stupid. It's true, right? When you become stressed, bad things start coming out of your mouth. We start to do bad things because stress is a painful thing. And when we feel pain, then we start behaving in bad ways. That's just the way things are. And so an excess of duties is bad. The way the famous phrasing in the Metta Sutta is appa kiccho. Appa kiccho literally means few duties, little work. So the idea here is that if you are on the spiritual path and you want to take it a long way, you shouldn't have too much work. And as a monastic too, it is very easy to come into too much work. Venerable Dhammapaya, are you sure you want to do that PhD? Are you not sure? Okay, no, whatever. I'm just messing around, so don't take me too seriously, please. You have to do what you have to do. But it's very easy to kind of become very busy in this world, and so. On the one hand, it does not matter how busy you are. On the other hand, you don't want to be too busy because otherwise it it becomes a problem. So the lay life is like farming in that it is a work with many requirements. When it fails, it is not very fruitful, but when it succeeds, it is very fruitful. The renunciate life is like trade in that it's work with few requirements, and when it fails, it is not very fruitful, but when it succeeds, it is very fruitful. So, I like this approach of the Buddha, and he doesn't kind of not necessarily say that one is better than the other, but it's about how we live our lives that matter. So this is very important to keep in mind so that we can support each other and we can do the right thing instead of kind of having too much of a hierarchy and these kind of things. So anyway, let's have a short 5-minute break and then we can have a Q&A in a few minutes.